I know I'm also going to enjoy your commentary. Your decode. So what are you
Decode
decoding
segment.
today, Nando?
Oh, just capitalism. It's a small, tiny subject. All right. Well, the coronavirus has claimed over 200,000 American lives and over 1 million people around the world, and it's even infected the friggin' president of the United States. But eventually, we will get over the plague. Sooner or later, there will be a vaccine, and life will go back to quote-unquote normal. But the real lasting effect of the pandemic is going to be economic. Just this week, Disney announced that it was going to lay off a staggering 28,000 workers.
That's right, Dom. Disney is laying off 28,000 domestic employees at its parks, experiences, and product segment. Now, that will affect employees across all levels, hourly, salaried, and executive roles. Disney is saying that 67% of those affected are part-time workers.
67% were part-time workers, meaning precarious, underemployed workers. But that wasn't the only grim news of the week. The airline industry announced that it too was letting go of tens of thousands of workers.
Thousands of airline industry workers are out of a job, hoping Congress will send a financial lifeline their way. Many of them are being furloughed or laid off today after talks on Capitol Hill to extend government relief programs amid the pandemic stalled. Across the board, an estimated 45,000 employees are being affected by these job cuts.
And this is not some temporary bump in the road. The damage, in many ways, will be permanent. Just let CBS News' transportation correspondent explain.
To talk more about this, we are joined by CBS News transportation correspondent Chris Van Cleve. Chris, great to have you with us on this sad day for the airline industry. So tell us, how long could these cuts last, and how will it impact travelers?
Well, for some of these employees, their jobs may never come back. And the airlines are predicting a 4 to 5 year recovery back to 2019 levels. And it's possible that some of these real junior people who were furloughed may not actually get an opportunity to get those jobs back.
Yeah, I had no idea you could be a transportation correspondent, but that sounds fun. Anyway, you would think that the devastation would worry the investor class. I mean, at the end of the day, someone has to buy their shit, and if no one has a job, well, no one can buy shit. So you would think. But no, take a look at this investor woman's reaction to the Disney news on CNBC.
Yeah, I think it's important that they're actually really trying to get a handle on their expenses. The saying, never let a crisis go to waste. So here, maybe this is an opportunity for them to get leaner, to have some cover to do that.
Now, you may be thinking to yourself, this woman is a psychopath. I mean, her reaction to nearly 30,000 people having their livelihood destroyed is that, hey, it's a good chance for Disney to get their labor costs in line so that investors like me can see an extra couple points on our investment. So who is this woman? Well, her name is Karen Finerman, and she's the CEO of something called Metropolitan Capital. And here's how a glowing pre-2008 profile in The Guardian described her. Quote, she's worth $100 million, runs a $400 million hedge fund, has 2 sets of twins, and 4 nannies. Fun. The piece goes on. Karen Finerman of Metropolitan Capital in New York is actually willing to crack open the secretive, testosterone-rich world of the hedge fund manager. She has decided to go against the prevailing ethos, keep your head down, don't get a profile, and make a virtue of her pioneering status as one of the first women to run a hedge fund. Oh, I get it. So she's just a girl boss. Yeah, sure, celebrating the fact that tens of thousands of people are now wondering how they'll make rent this month while she counts her millions and barks orders at her 4 nannies. But, she's just leaning in, I guess. But seriously, the news coming out of Disney and the airline industry validates a Washington Post analysis that said the economic collapse sparked by the pandemic is triggering the most unequal recession in modern U.S. history, delivering a mild setback for those at or near the top, and a depression-like blow for those at the bottom. The Post continues, at the height of the coronavirus crisis, low-wage jobs were lost at about 8 times the rate of high-wage ones. The devastation was deepest amongst the lowest paid, but middle-class jobs were not spared. A clear trend emerged. The less workers earned at their job, the more likely they were to lose it as businesses across the country closed. By the end of the summer, the downturn was largely over for the wealthy. White-collar jobs had mostly rebounded, along with home values and stock prices. The shift to remote work strongly favored more educated workers, with as many as 6 in 10 college-educated employees from working from home at the outset of the crisis, compared to about 1 in 7 who have only high school diplomas. And this, of course, is a political choice. People bemoan the lack of the gridlock in the American political system, and rightly so. But when it came time to bail out investors, Congress passed a law called the CARES Act in about 15 minutes.
So the House is clearly passing this unprecedented $2.2 trillion bill today. Matt, what are your concerns?
Well, I mean, it's not really a $2 trillion bill. It's more like a $6 to $10 trillion bill. So one of the reasons you can tell that the bill is packed with corporate goodies is that, Congress is debating and trying to figure out, is it $2 trillion, a bunch of money for hospitals or money for cities. And meanwhile, a couple days ago, Larry Kudlow is on a press conference and says, actually, this is a $6 trillion bill. And it's like, how does a bill go from $2 trillion to $6 trillion without anyone really noticing? And the answer is there's a bunch of stuff in there. And, there are people on Wall Street chattering about how it's actually going to be 10 trillion because, what's another 4? And that's how you know that the bill is just packed with stuff for Wall Street, for large monopolists. And it's done through a variety of opaque slush funds, the Federal Reserve, the FDIC guarantees of bank debt. There's a whole bunch of stuff that, some of us who worked in the financial crisis noticed, paid attention to, said, oh, that's where they're stealing all the money.
So it's a $2 trillion bill. There's a slush fund or something. Maybe it's a $6 trillion bill. Maybe it's 10. Who knows? The point is that despite the fact that Congress essentially gave companies trillions of dollars, they did not attach any strings to that money. Yes, there was a temporary expansion of unemployment insurance and, of course, the $1,200 check, but those are gone now. But many European governments, such as Denmark's, did attach some strings, and they promised to pay 75 to 90% of the workers' salaries if businesses did not fire them, ensuring that the bailout money was not just a blatant transfer of wealth to the top. So without massive government intervention to help regular people, corporations are using the pandemic to, quote, get leaner and fire people. Just because we all had to quarantine and social distance for months, the wheel of capitalism kept on churning. And like Karen Feinerman said, this is the time to purge workers and not just lean in, but get lean. This kind of purging is nothing new for capitalism. A recession or depression is a far more dramatic expression of a process that capitalism repeats again and again naturally. This is what Marx refers to as the, quote, reserve army of labor. He uses this phrase to distinguish between those workers within the active workforce and those in the reserves, also known as the unemployed. This army of reserve unemployed workers allows the capitalists to fix a potential problem. As they push their workers to create more and more, eventually labor markets tighten and wages rise. But rising wages are a big problem for the owners because they threaten profit margins. Profits are, of course, the point of the whole enterprise. So if an owner can get more units of goods with better technology and fewer workers, well, guess what, workers? You're fired. While technology can temporarily improve the conditions of workers that are lucky enough to keep their job, the presence of unemployment itself will eventually allow the capitalists to screw over their own workers because they can be more easily replaced by that army of reserve workers waiting on the sidelines. And that is one of the key contradictions at the heart of the capitalist system. It needs workers to do the labor to make all the stuff, but it also needs both a surplus population of unemployed people and markets of people that buy all of the stuff. But capitalists hate their own workers because they eat into their profits and they do annoying things like unionize, which is why you're seeing so many capitalists take the ghouls who run, so many capitalists like the ghouls who run Uber, desperately trying to automate workers away. The problem is that if every capitalist automated their entire workforce, eventually there would be no markets. And inequality, the kind we're seeing today, is a feature, not a bug of capitalism. There's been a lot of talk about how inequality has been on the rise for a while now. But that's really just capitalism reverting back to the norm. The post-war drop in inequality, in retrospect, is just a temporary state of affairs after 2 world wars and 1 Great Depression destroyed the capitalist class wealth. And they've learned since then, and inequality has gone back to what it was during the Gilded Age. Our only hope is to transcend it.
I love this topic. I love this topic so much, especially when you consider the way the CARES Act was written to essentially, provide loans to businesses unless they promise to keep their workers on board. But what I didn't even realize at the time when the CARES Act passed was that there was an expiration date to that rule. And so all these companies kept their workers to take that money and have that money forgiven as loans. And then as soon as September 30th came around and that rule expired, that's when you get these massive layoffs in the airline industry. Disney also reported that they were going to lay off and have laid off 28,000 of their own workers. And so one of the biggest issues that I have is, of course, the heart of it is how this system is supposed to work. This is the way it's supposed to work. But at the same time, you have congressional lawmakers who are elected by constituents to represent them, intentionally writing these laws in this way that essentially screw us all over. And it's beyond frustrating. And I love the point that you made about the markets, how with this giant population of unemployed people, well, then who's going to buy your products? You know, you can automate every single job, but who's going to have the money to buy your products? And so this is where I get worried, because the Fed comes in, they just, digitize money. They don't really print money.
Yeah.
And they bail out all these companies. And what I'm curious about, and no one has been able to answer this question, just answer it clearly. How long can the Federal Reserve do that? Because it's all inflating this giant bubble. Yeah, the fat cats are getting rich. They're paying themselves giant bonuses right now. Disney, for instance, had a number of executives who agreed to pay cuts early on during the pandemic, but all of their pay beginning in late August went back to normal, their normal compensation, as if the pandemic isn't still moving forward, as if they're not about to lay off all these people. So I would love, if anyone's watching this and you've come across any content that clearly explains how long the Federal Reserve can continue inflating this bubble, please let me know. But so far, everyone's like, yeah, we don't know. You would think this bubble would burst by now, but it hasn't.
Yeah, the presence of the way the Federal Reserve kind of works is like incredibly opaque. Very few people understand it. It's completely outside of like any democratic input. I'm guessing like the vast majority of lawmakers like have no idea what's going on at the Federal Reserve, and they just kind of do things and like trillions of dollars here, there, and like no one really like actually understands like what all of that means. And with this particular bill, the CARES Act, like I don't think we'll really understand its effect until years from now. It's such a fundamental restructuring of corporate power that it's just the effects of it are something that we won't be able to really understand for a long time. And it's just, and it passed 96-0 in the Senate. Like every single senator voted for it, and you kind of understand. I sympathize with that because at the end of the day, like they needed to do something to help people. Like this thing was going to collapse. Like everyone was like walking off toward the ledge, and the corporate class, the sort of capitalist owners of everything in the society, basically were able to hold a gun to everyone's head and be like, yeah, just give us trillions of dollars, and we'll allow little crumbs here for you regular people. And like, it just shows like how captured the system is. And if you zoom out even further, like you look, I get the feeling that it's basically like they're looting the safe while like the whole building is burning, right? Like that.
Yeah. Don't let a good crisis go to waste, Nando.
Don't let a good crisis go to waste. But I think that there's this feeling that, and you're seeing it now with all like the sort of new aggression towards China, that China was when it opened up its market to American capitalists, like that kind of sustained the system for a while, because like the market in the United States was like going to decline eventually as declining wages, right? But like China was like this growing new thing, and like all of a sudden we had access to like all these billions of people, and their incomes were rising. So like great, new markets for American capitalists. Like you're seeing this like with Hollywood and the NBA. Like China is like their biggest market right now, and like they need those access to these new markets. But like eventually like that's going to dry up, because for a million reasons, but like the Chinese government is wise to what's going on, and like eventually they're going to like, and they're starting to do that, which is why people here are having a freak out. But like So where are they going to go next? Like there are there's no new markets to conquer, and so eventually like they just have to, I don't know, like rob the safe while the building's burning. Like they just take everything in the short run and then live to see another day. I don't know, like in the long run we're all dead, like the Keynes quote. So yeah, I mean something's gonna happen. Like there's gonna be some sort of rupture. Like you said, can the trillions of dollars keep flowing indefinitely? Like this quantitative easing, which no one really understands that well either, which is just like inflating. Like something's gonna happen, and I am certainly not smart enough to know what it is or even fully understand all of it. But it really is like, it seems like we're arguing about noise 99% of the time when like all this is going on.
Yeah, you're absolutely right. And look, that's part of the reason why I really appreciated having Nomi Prinz on the show, because Nomi Prinz, who, was a Wall Street insider and decided to quit because she was so disgusted by the, activities that were going on. And she essentially became a whistleblower for what was happening at Wall Street. She wrote a whole book on easing called Collusion. I highly recommend you guys read it. And she's told me multiple times, she's like, the worst thing you can do right now is invest in the markets because it's going to come crashing down. Obviously, it's impossible to time it. But nothing that we see in the stock market right now is based in reality. I mean, Americans have not been able to spend much money. I mean, the money that they do spend usually comes in the form of credit, which is why consumer debt is in the trillions right now, much higher than it was prior to the 2008 economic collapse. And I'm talking about consumer debt that does not even include mortgages. I think the number is around $4.2 trillion. Yeah. But yeah, look, the CARES Act, it was a mixed bag. I want to make sure we're absolutely clear on that, because the robust unemployment benefits, which of course have expired, the additional $600 a week that's subsidized by the federal government. If you look at the trends, it was the first time in a long time that working Americans were able to put a little bit of money away, to save a little bit of money. And that tells you something, that that meager $600 a week is so much more than what American workers are getting paid by these companies that rake in, billions of dollars in profit every year and then got bailed out during the pandemic. So I love this topic, and I think you did a great job covering it.